Have you ever felt like a tiny boat tossed in a violent storm at the mercy of everything going wrong? What if you could become the deep ocean instead, completely silent, still and unbothered on the inside, no matter what chaos rages on the surface? Listen closely to this. In the heart of an ancient, bustling coastal metropolis, where the air was forever thick with the scent of salt water, roasting meats, and the heavy perfume of burning incense, lived a man named Nico. To the casual observer, Nico was a man who had conquered the world. He was a merchant of high standing, clad in the finest imported linens, residing in a sprawling villa with courtyards that caught the golden afternoon sun. His warehouses were filled with grain, his ledgers were thick with profits, and his name commanded respect in the highest echelons of the city's society. But inside the mind of Nico, there was no golden sun. There was only a perpetual, raging tempest. Despite his immense wealth and status, Nico was a prisoner to his own anxiety. His mind was a restless beast that never slept. When he lay in his silk-sheeted bed at night, he did not find rest. Instead, his thoughts would spin a dizzying web of catastrophic scenarios. What if the Mediterranean storm swallowed his fleet coming from Alexandria? What if the magistrates imposed a sudden, crippling tax on his trade routes? What if his competitors whispered falsehoods into the ears of the senators, ruining his reputation? What if he lost it all and was reduced to begging in the very streets he now owned? This invisible burden made Nico a brittle man. He snapped at his servants. He paced his marble floors until his heels ached and his jaw was perpetually clenched, grinding his teeth down in his sleep. His wealth had not bought him freedom. It had merely purchased a larger, more gilded cage of responsibilities and terrors. He was rich in gold, but utterly bankrupt in peace. The breaking point arrived on a sweltering midsummer afternoon. The sky above the city bruised into a deep, angry purple, and the wind began to howl, kicking up dust and tearing at the awnings of the marketplace. A messenger, breathless and soaked with sweat, arrived at Nico's estate. "Dominus!" the young man gasped, falling to one knee. "Word from the harbour master. The great storm off the coast of Crete. It has struck the fleet. 3 of your largest vessels, heavy with silk and spices, are unaccounted for. They are presumed lost to the depths." Nico felt the blood drain from his face. A cold, sharp stone of dread plummeted into his stomach. 3 ships. The financial loss was staggering, but it was the blow to his pride and his illusion of control that hurt the most. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The storm he had always feared had finally come. Unable to bear the stifling walls of his villa, Nico fled into the city. He wandered aimlessly through the crowded, chaotic agora. The market was a sensory overload. Merchants shouting over each other, the bleating of livestock, the clatter of bronze coins, the suffocating press of bodies. Usually, this vibrancy fueled him, but today it was a waking nightmare. Every face seemed to mock him. Every shadow seemed to whisper of his impending ruin. He felt as though the entire world was conspiring against his peace. As he stumbled through the artisans' quarter, a sudden commotion shattered his spiraling thoughts. A spooked horse, still hitched to a heavy wooden cart laden with iron tools, reared up in a panic. The driver was thrown to the ground, and the horse bolted blindly down the narrow, crowded street. People screamed and scattered, diving into alleyways and flattening themselves against walls. The runaway cart careened directly toward a small, modest pottery stall. Sitting behind the stall was an older man, his hands caked in grey clay, calmly shaping a bowl on a foot-powered wheel. Nico watched in frozen horror as the heavy wooden cart smashed into the stall. The sound of splintering wood and shattering clay echoed like a thunderclap. Dozens of beautifully crafted pots, vases and amphorae, weeks, perhaps months of painstaking labor, were obliterated in an instant. The cart finally ground to a halt against a stone pillar, just inches from where the old man sat. The street fell dead silent. The dust began to settle. Nico stared, expecting the potter to erupt into a fit of rage, to tear his clothes, to curse the gods, or to weep over his destroyed livelihood. Instead, the old man slowly stood up. He brushed the dust from his simple tunic. He did not look at the shattered remnants of his life's work. Instead, he walked calmly to the trembling, white-eyed horse. With slow, deliberate movements, he raised a hand and gently stroked the beast's sweaty neck, murmuring soft, soothing words until the animal's breathing slowed. Only then did the old man turn to look at his ruined stall. His expression was completely neutral. It was not the coldness of shock, nor the numbness of despair. It was a profound, unshakable tranquility. He bent down, picked up a large, jagged shard of a once beautiful vase, examined it for a moment, and gently set it aside. "Well," the old man said quietly, his voice steady and even. "It seems the universe has decided I need to make new pots." Nico was stunned. He pushed his way through the gathered crowd and approached the potter. "Old man," Nico demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and misplaced anger. "Are you mad? Your livelihood is destroyed. Months of your labor, smashed to dust in a single heartbeat. How can you stand there and speak of making new pots? Why are you not raging at the injustice of the gods?" The potter turned his serene, dark eyes upon Nico. They were like deep, still pools of water. "Why should I rage at the wind for blowing, or a frightened beast for running?" the potter asked mildly. "Rage will not put the clay back together. Anger will not unscare the horse. It will only break my peace, which is the only thing here that truly belongs to me." "But it is unfair," Nico insisted, thinking of his own sunken ships, projecting his own agony onto the potter. "You did nothing to deserve this." "Deserve?" The potter smiled gently. "The world does not deal in what we deserve, my friend. It simply deals. My name is Demetrius. I am a potter, yes, but primarily, I am a student of nature. And nature has just swept my table clean. Tell me, stranger, you wear the clothes of an emperor, yet your eyes are those of a hunted animal. What shattered cart has crashed into your mind today?" Nico hesitated. He was a proud man, unaccustomed to confessing his weaknesses, especially to a lowly artisan. But the profound stillness radiating from Demetrius broke through his defenses. Standing amidst the ruins of the pottery stall, Nico told him everything: the lost ships, the staggering debt, the constant, suffocating fear that ruled his days. Demetrius listened in silence, nodding slowly. When Nico finished, gasping for air as if he had just run a marathon, Demetrius pointed to an unbroken clay cup resting miraculously on a surviving shelf. "You see that cup?" Demetrius asked. "It is empty. Your mind is like a cup, Nico. Right now, it is filled to the brim with dirty water. Fears of tomorrow, regrets of yesterday, anxieties about things happening 1,000 miles away. If you want to find peace, you must first learn how to empty the cup. Come to my home at sunrise tomorrow. I will teach you how to build a fortress that no storm can breach." The next morning, before the sun had even fully crested the horizon, Nico found himself standing outside a small, unassuming stone dwelling on the edge of the city. The air was cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of his anxieties. Demetrius welcomed him inside. The room was sparsely furnished, a simple cot, a hearth, and a large wooden table covered in tools and raw grey clay. The simplicity of the space was disarming, There were no gilded mirrors to reflect one's vanity, no heavy tapestries to block out the world. "Sit," Demetrius said, gesturing to a wooden stool. He took a lump of wet clay, threw it onto his potter's wheel, and began to rhythmically kick the base, setting the stone wheel spinning. "You came here seeking peace," Demetrius began, his strong hands guiding the chaotic, wobbling lump of clay until it found its perfect, silent center on the spinning wheel. "But peace is not something you find in the world, Nico. The world is a turbulent place. It is a place of storms, runaway horses, thieves, diseases, and death. If your peace depends on the world being calm, you will be at war forever." Nico frowned. "How then can a man be at peace if the world is constantly trying to ruin him?" "By understanding the most fundamental law of nature," Demetrius replied, his eyes locked on the spinning clay. "The dichotomy of control. There are things in this universe that are up to us, and there are things that are not up to us. Suffering arises entirely and exclusively when we confuse the two." Demetrius pressed his thumbs into the center of the clay, and a beautiful bowl began to rise from the shapeless mass. "What is up to us, Nico? Our thoughts, our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our aversions. In short, whatever is our own doing. These things are free by nature, unhindered, and entirely under your command." He paused, letting the wheel slow down. "And what is not up to us? Our bodies, our property, our wealth, our reputations, the actions of others, the weather, the sea. In short, whatever is not our own doing. These things are weak, enslaved, subject to hindrance, and belonging to others, or belonging to fortune." Nico leaned forward, his brow furrowed in frustration. "Are you telling me my ships are not mine? I paid for them. I hired the crews. I plotted the courses. You paid for wood and canvas, and you hired mortal men," Demetrius corrected gently. "But do you control the winds of the Mediterranean? Do you command the hidden reefs beneath the waves? Do you dictate whether a pirate ship spots your sails on the horizon?" "Well, no," Nico admitted reluctantly. "Then the ships were never truly yours to begin with," Demetrius said, stepping away from the wheel and wiping his hands on a cloth. "They were given to you by fortune, and fortune has simply taken them back. You are grieving as if a part of yourself has been stolen, but you have only returned what was borrowed." Nico stood up, pacing the small dirt floor. "This is a passive philosophy. If I accept that nothing is in my control, why should I strive? Why should I build ships at all? Why not just sit in the dirt and wait to die?" "Do not confuse acceptance with apathy," Demetrius said sharply, his voice carrying the authority of a master. He walked over to a corner of the room and picked up a beautifully crafted wooden bow and a single, feather-fletched arrow. "Consider the archer," Demetrius said, holding the bow out to Nico. "An archer wishes to hit a target. What is in his control? He can choose the best bow. He can select a straight arrow. He can train his muscles every day to draw the string with a steady hand. He can control his breathing. He can aim with absolute precision. All of this is entirely up to him. He must strive for excellence in all these things." Demetrius mimed drawing back the bowstring, aiming at a knothole on the wooden door. "But," Demetrius continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "the very millisecond the arrow leaves the bowstring, it is no longer his. A sudden gust of wind could blow it off course. A bird could fly into its path. The target could suddenly move. The arrow might miss." He relaxed his stance and lowered the imaginary bow. The Stoic archer knows this. Therefore, his ultimate goal is not to hit the target. His goal is to shoot perfectly. Hitting the target is a preferred outcome, but it is not necessary for his peace of mind. If the wind blows the arrow astray, the archer does not weep, for he knows he did everything within his power. His self-worth is tied to his effort, not the outcome. Nico stopped pacing. The metaphor struck him with the force of a physical blow. He had spent his entire life tying his identity, his happiness, and his peace to the target. The safe arrival of the ships, the accumulation of gold, the praise of his peers. "I have been trying to control the wind," Nico whispered, staring at his trembling hands. "Yes," Demetrius nodded. "You have anchored your soul to things that drift on the tides of chance. When your ships sank, your peace sank with them. You must pull up your anchor, Nico. Drop it only within the fortress of your own mind. You were a good merchant. You built strong ships. You hired good captains. That was your aim. The storm was the wind. Let it go." For the first time in as long as he could remember, the tightness in Nico's chest began to loosen. A deep, shuddering breath escaped his lips. The crushing weight of the world's unpredictability, a weight he had carried for decades, suddenly felt lighter. He realized that he did not have to carry the ocean. He only had to steer his own mind. "It will take practice," Demetrius warned, seeing the revelation dawn in Nico's eyes. "The mind is like a wild dog. It will constantly try to run back to its old habits of worrying about the external world. When it does, gently pull it back. Ask yourself in every moment of distress, is this something I can control? If the answer is no, be ready to say, then it is nothing to me." Weeks turned into months, and Nico became a devoted student of Demetrius. He spent less time obsessing over his ledgers and more time observing the movements of his own mind. When a shipment of grain spoiled due to a leaky roof in a warehouse, Nico did not flog his overseer or tear his hair. He calmly ordered the roof fixed, recognized the financial hit as an external event outside his ultimate control, and went home to eat his dinner in peace. The city began to whisper about the strange, sudden serenity of the great merchant. But life, as Demetrius had warned, is an endless series of tests. The universe does not let a philosopher rest untested for long. As winter approached, a devastating blow landed. Nico's most trusted business partner, a man named Gaius, whom Nico had loved like a brother for 20 years, vanished. Worse, Gaius did not leave empty-handed. He had forged Nico's seal, emptied their shared treasury of gold, and fled across the sea under the cover of darkness. The loss of the ships had been a tragedy of nature. This was a tragedy of human malice. It was a deeply personal betrayal. When Nico discovered the empty vaults, the Stoic walls he had been carefully building crumbled. A profound, searing rage ignited in his blood. This was not the impersonal wind blowing an arrow off course. This was someone deliberately snapping his bow in half. The injustice of it tasted like ash in his mouth. He wanted revenge. He wanted to hire mercenaries to hunt Gaius to the ends of the earth and drag him back in chains. Consumed by a dark, swirling fury, Nico stormed up the hill to Demetrius's home. He threw open the door, his face flushed, his fists clenched so tightly his fingernails dug into his palms. "He took everything!" Nico roared, pacing the small room like a caged lion. "My oldest friend! I trusted him with my life, and he robbed me blind. Tell me, Demetrius, how does your philosophy excuse this? Am I to just accept the wickedness of men? Am I to smile while I am stabbed in the back?" Demetrius, who was quietly mending a tear in his cloak, did not look alarmed by Nico's outburst. He slowly tied off the thread, bit the end loose, and stood up. "I will not tell you anything in this room," Demetrius said, grabbing his walking staff. Your mind is too close to the fire. You cannot see the flames because you are inside them. Come with me. Demetrius led Nico out of the dwelling and began to hike up the steep, rocky path that led to the highest peak overlooking the city. Nico followed, grumbling and panting, his anger fueling his swift, aggressive strides. The climb was grueling. The air grew thinner and colder as they ascended above the noise and smoke of the sprawling metropolis below. Finally, they reached the summit. A biting wind whipped around them, but the view was breathtaking. The entire city stretched out before them, bordered by the vast, endless expanse of the dark blue sea. Look down, Demetrius commanded, pointing his staff at the city. Tell me what you see. Nico scowled. I see the city. I see the harbor. Look closer, Demetrius urged. Look at the great amphitheater. Look at the bustling agora, where you once thought your life was ending because of a runaway cart. Look at your sprawling villa. Nico squinted. From up here, his massive villa looked like a tiny, insignificant pebble. The magnificent ships in the harbor looked like dead leaves floating in a puddle. The tens of thousands of people moving through the streets were invisible, reduced to a collective, silent blur. This is the view from above, Demetrius said, his voice carrying over the wind. When you are down there, trapped in the narrow alleys of your own life, every insult feels like a mortal wound. Every lost coin feels like a tragedy. Your ego magnifies your suffering until it fills your entire universe. But elevate your mind, Nico. Ascend. Demetrius swept his arm across the horizon. Look at the vastness of the sea. Think of the continents beyond it. Think of the centuries that have passed before you were born, the empires that have risen and turned to dust on this very soil. Think of the infinite expanse of the stars above us at night, in the grand, unfathomable tapestry of the cosmos. What is the theft of a little shiny metal by one tiny mortal to another? Nico stood silent. The sheer scale of the perspective hit him. His monumental rage, which had felt like it could burn the world down, suddenly felt incredibly small, almost embarrassing. He was a speck on a speck in the vast theater of time. Gaius has wronged you, yes, Demetrius continued softly. He has damaged his own soul by acting with dishonor. That is his tragedy, Nico, not yours. He stole your gold, but do not let him steal your peace. Gold is heavy. It is a burden. Perhaps the universe has simply relieved you of it. But it hurts, Nico admitted, his voice cracking, the anger giving way to a profound sadness. The betrayal of a friend. It hurts deeply. Of course it does, Demetrius nodded. You are human. Stoicism is not about turning your heart to stone. It is about not letting the stone crush your spirit. You must learn the final, most difficult lesson, Nico. It is not enough to merely accept what happens. You must learn to love it. Love it? Nico looked aghast. Love betrayal? Love theft? Yes. Amor fati. A love of one's fate, Demetrius proclaimed, his eyes shining with a fierce, joyful light. A weak fire is easily extinguished by a handful of dirt, but a blazing bonfire, a roaring inferno. Whatever you throw into a roaring bonfire, be it wood, dirt, or garbage, the fire consumes it, uses it as fuel, and burns even brighter. He turned to Nico and placed a strong hand on his shoulder. Do not just tolerate this betrayal. Embrace it. Say to the universe, thank you for this obstacle. Why? Because it has removed a false friend from your life. Because it has given you the perfect opportunity to practice forgiveness. Because it tests your resilience. If your life was entirely easy, you would remain weak. This hardship is the fire, Nico. Be the bonfire. Consume this betrayal. Let it burn away your attachment to wealth, and use it to forge an unbreakable, peaceful soul. Nico stood on the mountaintop, the cold wind whipping his cloak. He looked down at the tiny, distant city, then out at the endless sea. The heavy, suffocating chains of bitterness and victimhood began to crack. A strange, powerful warmth bloomed in his chest. For the first time in his life, he did not feel like a victim of his circumstances. He felt like a master of his own inner world. He was ready to be the bonfire. The descent from the mountain was physically grueling, yet for the first time in his life, Nico felt as though he were floating. The bitter winds that had lashed his face on the summit now felt like a cleansing baptism. He had climbed the mountain as a victim of a cruel world. He walked down as a man who had reclaimed the empire of his own mind. When he returned to his sprawling, magnificent villa, the sun was just beginning to set, casting long, golden shadows across the marble courtyards. Before, this display of wealth would have swelled his chest with pride. Now, looking at the imported statues, the silk tapestries and the mosaic floors, Nico felt a strange detachment. He did not hate his wealth, nor did he suddenly despise beauty. But he saw these things for what they truly were, indifferent materials. They were not good, and they were not evil. They were simply temporary loans from fortune, incapable of making him a better or worse man. The next morning, the true test of his Stoic resolve began. Knowing his philosophy was worthless if it remained only a soothing thought on a mountaintop, Nico put it into practice through the discipline of action. Stoicism, Demetrius had taught him, was not an excuse to retreat from the world into passive apathy. It was a call to act with perfect justice, courage, and wisdom, while remaining entirely unattached to the outcome. Nico summoned his scribes and creditors to his central atrium. The air in the room was tense. The creditors, seasoned men of commerce, shifted nervously on their sandals. They had heard rumors of Gaius's betrayal and the loss of the fleet. They expected Nico to beg, to plead for extensions, or perhaps to weep and curse his former partner. Instead, Nico sat calmly at his heavy oak desk, his posture relaxed, his breathing deep and even. He did not wear his finest purple-dyed tunic. He wore a simple, undyed woolen garment. "My friends," Nico began, his voice steady and devoid of the desperate edge that usually accompanied financial ruin. "You know the news. The ships are at the bottom of the sea, and the treasury has been emptied by a man I trusted. I owe you vast sums of silver." A murmur of anxiety rippled through the creditors. One man, a wealthy grain merchant named Claudius, stepped forward. "Nico, we do not wish to see you ruined. But business is business. We must be made whole, or we will be forced to appeal to the magistrates to seize your assets." "There will be no need for the magistrates, Claudius," Nico replied with a gentle smile that entirely unsettled the room. "I will not fight you. I am liquidating my estate. The villa, the statues, the remaining warehouses, the country vineyards, everything is to be sold at auction by the end of the week. You will all be paid in full." The room fell dead silent. A man volunteering to strip himself of his entire fortune to honor his debts was unheard of in the cutthroat mercantile world of the city. Usually, men fought tooth and nail, bribing judges and hiding assets, clinging to their status until the very bitter end. "But Nico," Claudius stammered, genuinely shocked. "If you sell the villa and the vineyards, you will be left with nothing. You will have to live like a commoner in the lower districts. Your reputation, my reputation, Neco interrupted softly, is not my wealth. My reputation is my character. And my character demands that I pay what I owe. A man who sleeps in a palace bought with stolen coin is a prisoner. A man who sleeps in the dirt with a clear conscience is a king. True to his word, Neco dismantled his empire without shedding a single tear. He watched as auctioneers carried away the exquisite furniture he had spent decades collecting. He signed the deeds of his properties over to his creditors. Whenever a pang of loss threatened to rise in his chest, he pictured the bonfire Demetrius had described. He tossed the attachment into the flames and let it burn. However, the ultimate test of his newly forged spirit arrived on the final day of the auction. As Neco stood in the emptied, echoing halls of his former home, a woman appeared at the threshold. She was draped in a dark, worn cloak, her face pale and streaked with tears. It was Livia, the wife of Gaius. Neco's guards immediately moved to block her, but Neco raised a hand, waving them off. He walked toward her, his face a mask of profound stillness. Livia fell to her knees on the bare marble floor, weeping uncontrollably. "Neco, please, I had no part in it. I swear to the gods. He abandoned me too. He took everything in the middle of the night and left me with nothing but his debts. The landlords are throwing me out into the street. I have nowhere to go. I know you must hate me. I know you wish to see us all destroyed." A few months ago, Neco would have relished this moment. The old Neco would have seen Livia as an extension of Gaius, an object upon which to inflict his righteous vengeance. He would have laughed at her misery and thrown her into the dust, feeling a twisted sense of justice. But Neco looked down at the trembling woman and felt no anger. He saw the view from above. He saw the interconnectedness of all humanity, the Stoic concept of sympathia. We are all parts of the same body, born for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. To act against one another is contrary to nature. Gaius was a man deeply sick in his soul, poisoned by greed. But Livia was simply a fellow human being caught in the storm. Neco reached down and gently took Livia by the arms, pulling her to her feet. "I do not hate you, Livia," Neco said, his voice imbued with a startling warmth. "To hate you would be to let Gaius's poison infect my own soul. The man you knew as your husband is dead to us both, consumed by his own vices. But you are here, and you are suffering." Neco reached into his leather pouch, one of the few possessions he had left. He pulled out a heavy purse of silver coins, the very last of his liquid funds, saved to secure himself a modest dwelling. He placed it firmly into Livia's hands. "Take this," he commanded gently. "It is enough to buy passage to your family in Syracuse and to sustain you for a year. Go and rebuild your life." Livia stared at the silver, then up at Neco, her eyes wide with incomprehension. "Why? After what my family has done to you, why show me such mercy?" Neco smiled, a genuine, radiant expression that seemed to illuminate the empty, echoing room. "Because, Livia, true freedom is not having the power to destroy those who wrong you. True freedom is having the power to remain good in a world that invites you to be cruel. Go in peace." As Livia walked away, clutching the purse to her chest, Neco stood alone in his empty villa. He possessed no ships. He possessed no gold. He possessed no grand titles. Yet, as he breathed in the cool evening air, he knew with absolute, unshakable certainty that he was the wealthiest man in the empire. 5 years passed. The city, like all cities, continued its relentless churn of ambition, tragedy, and triumph. Nico now lived in a small, whitewashed room in the artisans' quarter, not far from where Demetrius's pottery stall used to stand before the old master had passed peacefully in his sleep. Nico earned his keep as a tutor, teaching philosophy and mathematics to the children of local merchants. He wore a simple, unadorned tunic. He ate coarse bread, olives, and cheese. Yet a strange phenomenon had occurred. Though he had lost all his worldly power, his influence in the city had grown tenfold. Men of high status, generals, and wealthy traders would secretly visit his small room at night to seek his counsel. They were drawn to him because he possessed the one thing their gold could not buy: total invulnerability to circumstance. They watched him move through the chaotic, loud streets with a profound, terrifying tranquility. He was the deep ocean. Storms raged on the surface of the city, but within Nico there was only crushing, silent depth. But a Stoic's training is never truly complete until it is tested by the ultimate shadow that hangs over all mortal life. A political shift shook the city. A new, ruthless magistrate named Severus was appointed by the capital to extract higher taxes and crush local dissent. Severus was a paranoid and cruel man who saw conspiracies in every shadow. He despised anyone who held influence over the people, viewing them as a threat to his absolute authority. It did not take long for Severus to hear of the beggar philosopher, who commanded more respect than the magistrate himself. Severus ordered his guards to drag Nico into the Grand Basilica for a public tribunal. The great hall was packed with citizens, murmuring in fear. Heavily armed legionaries lined the marble walls. Severus sat elevated on an ivory chair, draped in heavy crimson robes, looking down at Nico, who stood barefoot on the polished floor. "Nico the merchant," Severus sneered, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "Or should I say, Nico the traitor. I have been informed that you hold secret meetings in your hovel. I have been told you poison the minds of the youth against the state. I have been told you hoard hidden wealth that you refuse to pay in tribute to your emperor." Nico looked up at the magistrate. He felt the familiar, ancient biological urge to panic, the racing heart, the tightening of the stomach. But the citadel of his mind, built stone by stone over 5 years, stood firm. He observed the physical sensations of fear, acknowledged them, and gently dismissed them. They were not him. "I am a teacher, magistrate," Nico replied, his voice calm, clear, and perfectly steady. It did not echo with defiance, nor did it tremble with submission. "I teach men how to govern their own minds. If governing oneself is a crime against the state, then I am guilty. As for wealth, my ledgers are open to the world. I own a tunic, a pair of sandals, and a few scrolls. I have nothing to hide, and nothing to give." Severus's face darkened. He was a man who ruled by fear. He knew how to break men who valued their money, their status, or their bodies. But looking into Nico's eyes, he saw no handles with which to grasp him. "Do not play games with me, old man," Severus hissed, leaning forward. "You speak with the arrogance of a man who does not understand his position. I have the power to take everything from you. I can have you beaten. I can banish you to a barren rock in the sea. I can sever your head from your shoulders right here, on this floor. Do you understand who you are speaking to?" Nico did not blink. The entire hall held its collective breath, anticipating the philosopher to fall to his knees and beg. Instead, Nico took a slow, deliberate step forward. "Magistrate Severus," Nico spoke, his tone carrying a profound, almost paternal pity. "You threaten me with the loss of my property, but I have already given it away. You threaten me with exile, but the entire world is my home, for I am a citizen of the cosmos. You threaten me with chains, but you can only bind my leg. Not even Zeus himself can break my freedom of choice." Severus gripped the arms of his ivory chair, his knuckles turning white. No one had ever spoken to him this way. "And as for death," Naco continued, stepping into the realm of memento mori, the meditation on mortality. "Do you think you frighten me with death? I have been dying every day since the moment I was born. My body is a fragile, rented room, destined to collapse. You do not hold the power of life and death over me, Severus. You only hold the power to speed up what nature has already decreed. If it is my time to die, I will die. But I will not die trembling, and I will not die a slave to your ego." The silence in the basilica was deafening. The citizens stared in awe. Even the hardened legionaries looked at the man in the simple tunic with a newfound, silent reverence. Nico had done the impossible. He had looked into the maw of absolute tyrannical power and stripped it of all its teeth, simply by refusing to value the things the tyrant could take away. Severus sat frozen, his face pale and sweating. He realized, in a moment of terrifying clarity, that he was entirely powerless. You cannot threaten a man who has nothing to lose. You cannot terrify a man who has already embraced his own mortality. In this grand hall, surrounded by armed guards and wearing the robes of state, Severus was the weak, frightened slave to his own passions, and the barefoot man standing below him was the undisputed emperor. "Get him out of my sight," Severus finally choked out, waving a trembling hand. "Throw him out into the streets. He is a madman. He is of no use to us." The guards hesitated, then gently, almost respectfully, escorted Nico to the heavy bronze doors of the basilica. They did not push him. They opened the doors for him. Nico stepped out into the blinding midday sun of the agora. The bustling, noisy, chaotic world swallowed him up once more. The merchants yelled, the carts rattled, the stray dogs barked. The storm of the world was raging exactly as it always had, and exactly as it always would. But as Nico walked slowly through the crowd, heading back to his small, quiet room to prepare for his evening students, he didn't feel the wind. The fire of adversity had burned away every last impurity in his soul. He was untouchable. He was free. He was the deep, silent ocean. If this story brought you a sense of peace, and you want to continue training your mind with timeless Stoic wisdom, please take a moment to leave a like, share this with someone who truly needs it, and subscribe to the channel. Hitting that notification bell ensures you won't miss our upcoming deep dives into building your own inner citadel and more daily philosophies to transform your life. Thank you for watching. Stay stoic, and I will see you in the next video.